I have never been the loud one in my family. I learned early that silence kept the peace, that giving quietly earned fewer arguments than asking for thanks. While others measured success by applause, I measured it by stability, by knowing that the people I loved were safe, supported, and never afraid to dream too big. That had always been my role. The dependable one. The woman who handled things behind the curtain. That was why the family dinners mattered to me. They were the few times I let myself pretend we were equal, that my contributions didn't create invisible hierarchies. That night, the table was crowded with familiar faces, clinking glasses, and rehearsed smiles. My sister sat across from me, her posture stiff, her eyes never quite meeting mine. My niece bounced in her chair, restless and loud, the way 16-year-olds often are when they know the world bends for them. I wore my bracelet without thinking. It was simple but elegant, gold, understated, refined. I had received it years ago after surviving a chapter of my life no one at that table knew how to acknowledge. It wasn't flashy, but it was mine. It reminded me that I had endured, that I had built something solid from nothing. Halfway through dinner, as conversation drifted from work to school to vacations I never joined, my niece leaned toward me. Before I could react, she reached across the table and snatched the bracelet right off my wrist. "Hey," I said softly, startled more than angry. She laughed. Not embarrassed. Not apologetic. "Loud enough for everyone to hear," she said. "Mom says it's from the flea market." The words landed like a slap. There was laughter, awkward, careless, cruel. Someone snorted. Someone else avoided my eyes. My sister didn't correct her. She didn't even look surprised. She simply sipped her drink as if nothing of importance had been said. My niece twirled the bracelet between her fingers, careless and rough. I reached out, my hand trembling just enough for me to notice. That's when it slipped. The bracelet hit the table with a sharp metallic sound. The clasp snapped. Silence swallowed the room. I stared at the broken pieces, my chest tightening. It wasn't about the bracelet anymore. It was about the ease with which my dignity had been handled, grabbed, mocked, and dropped. "I didn't mean to," my niece said, though her tone suggested inconvenience rather than remorse. My sister finally spoke. "Oh, it's just a bracelet. Don't be so sensitive." Sensitive. That word had followed me my entire life whenever I dared to expect respect. I forced a smile, because that was what I had always done. I gathered the broken pieces into my palm and excused myself from the table. In the bathroom mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked calm. Composed. But behind her eyes was something new, something sharper than hurt. For the first time I understood the truth I had been avoiding. They didn't value what I gave. They didn't respect who I was. And they believed I would keep paying for both. That night, as I lay awake with the broken clasp on my bedside table, I realized something quietly powerful. Some breaks are accidents. Others are awakenings. Sleep never came that night. I lay in the dark listening to the hum of the city outside my window, my thoughts circling the dinner over and over like a wound my mind refused to stop touching. On my bedside table, the bracelet rested in two pieces. The broken clasp caught the light from the lamp, dull and unfinished, exactly how I felt. I kept thinking about the way my niece had said it, flea market. Not as a joke. As a verdict. A sentence passed down from her mother, spoken through a child's careless mouth. That was when I understood it wasn't a single moment of disrespect. It was a belief that had been growing quietly for years. They had forgotten who paid for things. Or worse, they remembered and chose to diminish it. I thought back to the first time my niece showed talent. She was 10, small fingers hovering uncertainly over piano keys at a family gathering. Everyone clapped politely when she finished. I was the one who noticed the discipline behind the music, the spark that needed nurturing. I was the one who asked about lessons, about teachers, about costs. I was the one who said, "I'll take care of it." From that moment on, my support became routine, expected. private instructors, better instruments, summer programs, travel for competitions. I signed checks, wired transfers, negotiated contracts. I attended recitals quietly, sitting in the back row so no one would feel uncomfortable about who made it possible. When the conservatory acceptance letter came, everyone celebrated as if it had fallen from the sky. No one mentioned the tuition. No one asked how it would be paid. Because somewhere along the way, my generosity had stopped being a gift and turned into an assumption. Lying there in the dark, I asked myself a question I had avoided for years. If I stopped tomorrow, would they still respect me? The answer came quickly. Painfully. I remembered every time my sister brushed off my opinions. Every time she spoke to me with that subtle edge, as if my role was fixed and unchanging. Provider. Backup. Safety net. Never authority. Never someone whose feelings required care. The bracelet hadn't broken the relationship. It had revealed it. I sat up and reached for my laptop. Not in anger. Not in revenge. In calm. The kind of calm that arrives after grief finishes screaming. I opened the conservatory account. My name. My signature. My funds. Every legal detail was exactly as I remembered. I reread the agreement carefully, line by line, the way I always did. The truth stared back at me, undeniable and solid. This future existed because I allowed it. I closed the laptop without making a decision yet. Instead, I held the broken bracelet in my hand. It occurred to me that I had spent years protecting everyone else's dreams while shrinking my own boundaries smaller and smaller. I had taught them how to treat me by accepting too little in return. I wasn't angry anymore. I was awake. By the time dawn began to lighten the edges of the room, I knew one thing with certainty. Respect is not something you ask for. It is something you stop funding when it's denied. And for the first time, choosing myself didn't feel cruel. It felt overdue. Morning arrived without ceremony. No dramatic music. No shaking hands. Just clarity, sharp and steady. I made my coffee the same way I always did, stood by the window, and watched the city wake up as if nothing in the world had shifted. But everything had. I opened my laptop again, this time without hesitation. The conservatory portal loaded slowly, each second stretching long enough for doubt to creep in. I ignored it. Doubt had kept me small for too long. I navigated to the payment section, the familiar figures staring back at me, $60,000, already scheduled, already promised. Money I had given without conditions. Money they believed was guaranteed. I clicked cancel sponsorship. A confirmation window appeared, sterile and unemotional. Are you sure you want to permanently withdraw funding? I read the word permanently twice. Then I clicked yes. That was it. No thunder. No tears. Just a quiet end to an entitlement they had mistaken for love. The email confirmation arrived seconds later. I closed the laptop and exhaled, surprised by how light my chest felt. I wasn't taking something away. I was reclaiming something that had always been mine, my agency. The phone rang that afternoon. I let it ring. Then it rang again. And again. Messages piled up, each one more urgent than the last. By evening, I finally answered. What did you do? My sister demanded, skipping pleasantries. I made a decision, I said calmly. You had no right. Her voice rose. You're punishing a child over a stupid joke. I waited for her to finish. Then I spoke, carefully, deliberately. I didn't cancel her future. I stopped paying for one where I'm disrespected. Silence followed, thick, heavy. My niece called next. Her voice cracked, not with remorse, but fear. Fear of consequences she had never been taught to consider. Auntie, I didn't mean it like that, she said. It was just a bracelet. I closed my eyes. No, I replied softly. It was never just a bracelet. I told her the truth, not angrily, not harshly. I told her about the years of support, the sacrifices, the quiet ways I had shown up. I told her how words spoken without care can cost more than people realize. No one apologized that night. Not really. They tried to bargain instead. What if we fix it? What if she says sorry? What if we talk about it? But respect doesn't begin after consequences. It begins before entitlement. I didn't argue. I didn't justify myself further. I simply said, this decision stands. When the calls finally stopped, the house felt still. Peaceful. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for gratitude that would never come. I took the broken bracelet to a jeweler the next day. The clasp could be repaired easily, he said. Stronger than before. I smiled at that. Some things are worth fixing. Others are worth ending. As I walked back to my car, sunlight warming my face, I realized the sweetest part of revenge wasn't the loss they felt. It was the strength I had finally claimed. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't shamed anyone. I had simply stopped paying the price of being taken for granted. And that silence, my silence, spoke louder than anything I had ever said. The days after the cancellation were quieter than I expected. No arguments, no pleading, no attempts at reconciliation, just the weight of absence where entitlement once lived. I realized, in a strange way, that the air felt lighter. The chaos that had always hovered over family gatherings, the judgment, the comparison, the unspoken debts, was gone. Not because anyone had changed, but because I had. I held the bracelet in my hands again, now repaired. The clasp glinted in the light, stronger than before. I ran my fingers over the delicate links, and for the first time, I didn't see it as a symbol of betrayal. I saw it as proof that things could be mended, not by begging, not by accommodating, but by care, by intention, by knowing what was worth saving. The lesson had been painfully clear: not all breaks are meant to be fixed. Some are meant to wake you up. The broken clasp had been a mirror. And in that reflection, I finally saw the truth of my own worth. I thought about my niece. She had grown up believing that what I gave her had no value. Perhaps she still believed it. Perhaps she would always struggle to understand the consequences of care taken for granted. And yet, this was not my burden anymore. My responsibility had been to show her what genuine support looked like. That lesson had been taught, just not in the way anyone expected. I also thought about my sister. The dismissive shrug, the careless words, the laughter at the dinner table, they were all a part of a pattern I had ignored for too long. I had been the one bending, excusing, forgiving silently, and in doing so, I had allowed my dignity to be minimized. That ended. And in that ending, I found liberation. With the money that had once been tied up in her tuition, I made plans for myself. I invested in causes that mattered, in opportunities that honored effort and respect. I gave to students who saw hard work as sacred, not as something disposable. I gave to myself, in ways that had been long overdue, time, space, and recognition of my own value. Family gatherings would come again. I would attend, but I would no longer bend to the expectation that my generosity was infinite or that my feelings were optional. I would smile, yes, and speak when necessary, but I would never again shrink to keep others comfortable. That quiet, resolute strength was now mine. Unshakable. Permanent. And in the quiet moments, when I touched the bracelet, I no longer felt hurt. I felt proof that things could be restored when they mattered, and that boundaries could protect without cruelty. I felt the deep satisfaction of having acted with both grace and justice. Sometimes, revenge isn't loud. Sometimes, it is silence, repair, and reclaiming your power. Sometimes, it is walking away from those who taught you disrespect, stronger, wiser, and finally, free. The bracelet shone in my hand, yes. But more than that, so did I.